And
This is
gonna share our
these are all these
screen
blank
here.
lines where you put in something, and then these are all these other blank lines where you put in something. Yeah.
All right. And
You better put your roller skates on, because
see what I mean? That thing's just acting so slow. Once it finally shares, we'll be in great shape because it's just a Word document that we're going to be looking at. There we go. All right, so the new construction contract, very similar to the residential contract in many ways. However, I've got these, and I'm not sharing to the people who are in attendance today. Let me do that. I also tried to cut my lips off while I was shaving today, so it's turning out to be a really good time.
go back to bed.
Should go back to bed. Somebody hit reset. New construction contract, very similar to the residential in many ways. However, on here I have asterisked the items that are different. So, of course, names, address, and legal, price and loan type, agency, and closing costs. Those are the first 5 clauses. They're identical. They're identical. There's no issue there. But then we come to number 6. And number 6 is a little bit different. It's application for financing. Buyer will apply for the loan within this amount of days. They'll pay for appraisal and credit report. If the loan goes bad, the buyer understands they won't get that money back. However, if the seller defaults, the seller agrees to refund that money to the buyer. So that's a little different. If the seller defaults on the build, then they'll refund the appraisal and the credit report. And that's something that isn't really discussed. So now you know, not a huge deal, but still a deal. Paragraph 7, this involves some discussion and some clarity that we don't have yet. And I'm in talks with other brokers and with Mr. Grooms down in Little Rock about this, because this means that the buyer will secure the construction loan, in my opinion. And we should probably read this paragraph and just go ahead and see what we as a group think on this, because this paragraph is very different than anything else we have. I'm going to jump into that thing is just going to go slow. I'm going to jump into it on this other computer. Well, no. Okay. So we're looking at paragraph 7. And on paragraph 7, this is your application for financing paragraph. What? I do not. I will read it out loud and then we can go from there. Okay, paragraph 7 says, before seller will be required to start construction. A, it's not applicable. Construction is in progress or complete. B, secure approval for financing. And then C, provide a letter satisfactory to seller from a financial institution showing buyer has liquid available funds sufficient to pay the purchase price. So A is obvious, it's not applicable. Construction's in progress or complete. B, the
Say that
buyer,
again.
A is not applicable. Construction is in progress or complete. So that's the option, not applicable, because the builder has already started. Or B, the buyer will secure approval for financing. And then C, the buyer's paying cash and they can show that they have the cash money. Well, my interpretation of this is that every single one of our contracts should be A, even if the ground hasn't been broken. Because I believe that this paragraph shows whether the buyer is securing a construction loan or the seller. And I believe that's not clearly defined. And in almost every case in Northwest Arkansas, the builder is carrying the construction loan. Checking B means that the buyer has secured approval, not pre-qual, not pre-approval, approval for the loan. When does approval happen? Day before closing, right? So this clause is messed up. It needs more clarity for the public. We're working on that. And what this says to me is who's carrying the construction loan, not where is the buyer at in the process. So be ready. We're going to get more clarity on that very soon.
In your discussion with other brokers and Tim Grimm's, what's been their reaction?
They say, oh my gosh.
It's not
Yeah.
clear.
Right. So the paragraph that I currently have written, does this mean the buyer will be securing the construction loan? If the seller has the construction loan, then the construction is already in progress. 7B says to secure approval, not pre-approval or pre-qual. It seems to me 7B should never be marked as mortgages aren't approved until after appraisal and complete underwriting. So when can you get an appraisal done on that? You can't get approval on that until the construction's done. So this doesn't seem like a well-written
Anybody
clause.
was in on redoing these to see what that intent was?
I have not.
I think we know what the
I think that's the intent. I do. I think the intent is what I'm saying, but it's not clear. I do. Right. Yeah. Right. Interpretation of that in our market for a long time has been that the buyer has a pre-qual letter. Well, that's very different than approval.
builders have said.
Yes, and required it.
I think that's the building's interpretation also. Never got any pushback.
Right, right. So above that, we have application for financing. That's the clause that matters. Have you applied? Buyer will apply for the loan within this amount of days. They'll pay for the appraisal and the credit report. What we've done is we've melded those together as if they're the same, and they're not. They're not. That's very different. Who's getting the construction loan is really what paragraph 7 should say, in my opinion. Paragraph 8 is the same, it's earnest money. Paragraph 9, non-refundable deposit, is a little bit different. Non-refundable deposit, pre-approval is not the same as pre-qualified. So let's look at what number 9 says. Non-refundable construction deposit. The construction deposit is funds tendered by buyer. So they're calling it a construction deposit instead of just non-refundable paid to seller. Tendered by buyer to compensate seller for liquidated damages that may be incurred by seller resulting from buyer failing to close on this transaction. That's still the same. Liquidated damages shall include but not be limited to seller's time, efforts, labor, and expenses required in preparing plans, specifications, pricing, general consulting, and interest expense on the property during construction. Some the same, some different there. The construction deposit is not to be considered a part of the earnest money specified in the earnest money addendum. If any of this real estate contract, the construction deposit will be credited to buyer at closing. Buyer shall hold listing firm and selling firm harmless of any dispute regarding the construction deposit. Buyer expressly acknowledges the construction deposit is not held by either listing firm or selling firm. Construction deposit may be commingled with other monies of seller, such sum not being held in escrow, trust, or similar account. Now we move on. Buyer will deposit blank with seller as the above specified and defined construction deposit. A, not applicable. We're not doing a non-refundable deposit. B, within blank days after lender has issued the pre-approval or commitment letter for financing for buyer. What is a pre-qual letter? A pre-qual letter says the buyer has applied, and based on what the buyer has said, they're approved for X amount of dollars. What is a pre-approval?
That's been verified.
Buyer has or the loan officer has verified some of what the buyer has said to the extent that the loan officer is content. What is a commitment letter? The underwriter is satisfied. We're moving forward. 3 stages. Pre-qual. If what the buyer is saying is true, we're good to go. Pre-approval. Lender says, I think I've verified enough. Looks good. Commitment letter. They're good. We're going to close. Okay. So this says blank days after lender has issued the pre-approval or commitment letter for financing. The next option is after the commitment letter for financing for buyer and prior to seller beginning construction. What sense does that make?
Based off the conversation we just had.
It only makes sense if the buyer is carrying the construction loan. Right? Do we do that in this market? Not common practice. Yeah, very rare. Very rare. So B is our option. And we're not going to do that until the commitment letter or pre-approval's been done, one or the other. Now, if we say D, it would be 3 days after this contract signed, which is probably what a builder wants in this market. So that's probably the clause that we need to drop in from there. Does that make sense?
I think that's the one I checked with B. And after we signed the contract.
Yeah.
72 hours.
Makes sense.
So,
Makes sense.
so in practice, up to this point, let's say you can give it pre-qualification, really doesn't address.
This.
So at any time, if something were to come up, I mean, if the builder goes and builds based off of that, I mean, it's just off, it's really needs to be
Cleaned up.
cleaned up, you're right. There's just way too much that will go wrong.
Right.
If somebody was in this market.
Yep. We got some work to do down in Little Rock. We do. We do. So next we have plans and specifications. Buyer and POA must approve the plans. Well, most of the time, the POA is currently ran by the builder, so that's not an issue. Options are A, the construction is already done. B, the plans are attached and agreed upon. Buffington always sends those. They're the best ones. They've got it well written up. They sit down with the buyer, they go through it, they make them sign it. They're the best ones. Will be agreed upon by, and regularly for me is 14 days, 2 weeks for the appointment to happen. If you can't agree upon the plans within 14 days, the buyer or seller can both terminate. So they sit down together, the buyer says, I want this and I don't want to pay extra. The seller can be cool with that or not cool with that, and agree or not agree. And then the seller could say, no, I'm not going to do that for the price we're at, and terminate. And the buyer can do the same. Well, if you won't do it, then I'm out. Make sense? And then seller can make minor revisions to correct errors in the plans. So there are times when a closet gets moved a foot, things like that happen. What does the word or words minor errors make you think? Makes me think, to who? Right? So it's a judgment call on both parties. What does a minor error mean? That's not very specific, but I don't know how to tighten that up.
Yeah, 'cause you couldn't very well list examples of minor errors
Mm-mm.
that satisfy both.
Yeah.
both buyer.
Then we have the last part of that clause. If items chosen by buyer aren't available, the seller will give written notice and the buyer will have 10 days from notice to pick out something comparable. Okay.
Percent on those minor errors, I think a lot of times the buyer doesn't even hear about it.
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. And it doesn't say that the seller has to notify. So they wouldn't. Yeah.
So we read that last paragraph.
If items chosen by buyer aren't available, the seller will give written notice. The buyer has 10 days from written notice to pick out the new. So they can't just replace it. They have to give notice according to the contract.
That's not always
No, that's not happening.
happening.
Number 11, additions or changes. Option A is the construction is already done. Then you say we agree to handle those changes by, yeah, of course, if construction is complete, you mark A. If not, mark B. B states that changes must be agreed to in writing. Buyer might have to pay for these changes at the time of request. So if they go in and they say, you know what, I hate these light fixtures, we've got to change them. They might be charged for the complete new light package because they'd already bought and installed the first light package. Makes sense. And they might say, you have to pay for that right now. Outside of closing, most likely. Okay. Then we have stage of construction. So the things that we have to look at most in this contract right now, in my opinion, are paragraph 6 and 7. Paragraph 6 says you have to apply for financing, which applying and getting a pre-qual, once again, means what? Anybody? It's based on what the buyer has told the lender. Nothing's been verified.
The other thing about that too is, especially in the market now, with things so far out, what does that really mean?
What does it really mean? Everything is so far out from closing. Rates are going to change. That pre-qual or pre-approval may go away, because if we jump, let's say we jump from right now 4%-ish to 6%, that lowers a buyer's ability to buy by 20%. You're buying a $300,000 house. Now you can afford a 20% of that is 300 times 60,000 less. Yeah. Yeah. Huge difference. Huge. That's why so many people are in a rush. They're not willing to wait for the market. We got to hustle. Rates are going up. So apply for financing is paragraph 6. They're going to base that pre-approval or pre-qual on what you tell them and your credit score. That's it. Pre-approval means the lender, the loan officer has verified some things. And then commitment means the underwriter has verified and we're ready to close. You can't get the pre-approval or commitment. I thought I was bleeding again. You can't get the pre-approval or commitment without a house. Can't do it. So number 7 again is the one we're paying attention to and trying to figure out if that means who's going to carry the construction loan. And then the other big paragraph to really pay attention to right now is stage of construction and completion. Now pay attention to this. A, it's already done. Easy Street. Pray for those. B, the seller or list agent say the property will be done on blank. When does that happen? On time? Never. I don't know that I've ever had a new construction close on time in 18 plus years, maybe 2 or 3. It's that rare. It's that rare. Then C, they'll start construction in blank days and finish by blank. So bare land. So it says, get us, actually, let me go to the contract. And that's paragraph 11, right? No, 12. The construction will begin blank days after buyer has provided a letter from financial institution showing availability of funds that satisfies seller and deposit of any interest money or construction deposit as specified in 8 and 9 of this contract has been made. The completion of construction is estimated to be on or before. I'm back to thinking B is for a build where the seller is carrying the construction loan. C is for if the buyer is going to carry the construction loan. That's what I'm back to thinking here on this. Does that make sense? It seems to be the only logical way, in my opinion. Any especially brokers have any input on that? Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Does it seem radical?
No, I can see how you can interpret it that way. It's just not
the practice.
the practice.
Yeah. All right. So next, I want to talk to you guys about what happens in that clause. If bad things happen during the construction process, as the last paragraph of 12, like when you hear your pastor say, instead of going to the contractor, or the King James version, this is Jason's version. If bad things happen during the construction process that delay the construction, the buyer and seller agree to delay the completion of the home to blank unless we write up an extension. Okay. When will the builder use that clause? Every time. Every time.
It rained while we were building.
Yep.
So that's as simple as, we're just talking about moving the closing date.
When you fill out the contract, that is the date that the builder looks at.
Got it.
We have a first completion date that they have quoted us.
Right.
We write up the contract and give them the amount of time beyond that, and that's the date that they follow. Where we get in sticky with it is in paragraph 21 and in closing date. So let's skip all these 13 to 20, no, 13 to 19, because they're the same as the residential contract. 20, seller's warranty. We're used to writing in that column, builder's 1-year warranty. That's redundant. It's in the paragraph. Write it if you feel you need to. Honestly, I'll probably still write it just because. But it's important to note that paragraph states it does not include cracks in foundation or concrete. It does not include swelling or contraction of wood or other like materials and the cracks that causes. Interesting to know. So what normally swells and contracts in a home that's noticeable is the molding. And it's pretty, and they want it to stay pretty, but gaps happen because the cold and the heat.
And we're using wood that's greener than it used to be.
We are using greener wood. Yeah. Yeah. So with that, let's combine and study paragraph 12 with paragraph 21. Stage of construction, when it's going to be done, and then inspection for new homes. Buyer may personally or have property professionally inspected at any and all stages of construction. This says the buyer can go on site and look, or hire somebody to go look, or have their grandpa go look. At all stages. I know a guy that does HVAC. He said he'd go by there, let me know when HVAC's in. I know a guy that used to be a framer. He wants to go look at it for me after that's done. They can do that. They can do that. Buyer will provide a punch list with the inspection repair survey addendum within blank days, and here are the options after contract is signed, of course, for completed homes. After certificate of occupancy is issued, or blank days prior to closing. When do you want this done? If the house isn't finished, when is the right time to do that?
A lot of utilities like that are going for
Right.
Or the 10 days before closing.
What if the certificate of occupancy hasn't been issued?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what order do you typically get that in?
So if the certificate of occupancy hasn't been issued, going 10 days prior to closing doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, so again, my question would be, do you normally see the certificate of occupancy earlier than 10 days prior to completion, or?
Don't know.
Don't know? So
Depends
it
on the
varies.
builder.
It can vary. Sometimes that's holding up the closing.
it. Well, that may not, maybe the city can, lay by gas, put gas, not
Right.
necessarily the builder.
And it could be that the city inspector is booked and can't get there until so many days. So with that knowledge, what do we need to do? B is our option.
Well, what happens if, the certificate of occupancy is issued a day before closing? You haven't had an opportunity, you've already know that's coming and you've moved the date,
Yes,
you've already moved the closing date.
That's
You
the
haven't got
thing.
the inspection.
you have to wait. Now, here's what happens. Here's the practice that happens. The buyer is on hold. The date keeps moving because the certificate of occupancy hasn't happened. They keep saying that, well, we can't get the certificate of occupancy because the gas company won't come out. Then the gas company comes out, and now we can't get the certificate of occupancy because the city inspector can't make it. Everybody's getting frustrated. The buyer needs to move in. The seller won't let them have early occupancy because they've been through that before, and that's a really bad decision on the seller's part. So this buyer is getting frantic. Where am I going to live? What am I going to do? The certificate of occupancy comes and the buyer says, screw the inspection, I'm just moving in. We'll find things, we've got a home warranty,
Kind of what you're-
we've got a builder's warranty for defects. Let's just move in. They're between a rock and a hard place. And that's their decision to make against our better judgment.
So if you, I guess one option would be if you're working with the inspector that would come back out after the utilities, you could have them go in and take a look at everything else. And come back, check make sure the fireplace lights and the gas
Yeah.
stove lights,
Right.
whatever. And at least you would know, because it says you don't have to turn in the punch list and inspection repair to him until after that. You can still
Right.
Probably work with the builder. Most of the builders I've worked with have been pretty good about taking the inspection report and going through and kind of knocking stuff
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
But they may not, but at least your buyer would know.
So let's say you're working with a first-time home buyer and they've saved all they can just to be able to purchase the property and they want an inspection, but they're frantic and they need to move in. They can get that home inspection done because it says we can do that at any stage. They can get it done without everything done. And then after closing, we can have the inspector come back out. They will charge them. What have they done? The buyer has spent all their money. So be aware that you may be offering to pay for an inspector to come back out. If you're selling new construction during these crazy times, your gift to them may be, hey, I'll pay for the inspector to come back out and then we'll have the punch list completed. And then you'll be able to approach the builder about fulfilling their warranty. Now, here's the issue. What's the bill? Why was the construction closing late in the first place? Because the builders are overwhelmed and the contractors are overwhelmed and they're not getting stuff done on time. What's the buyer going to be waiting for? Their warranty punch list to be fulfilled. And it's going to be frustrating. If we let them know that on the front end, will that help some of their frustration? Yes. They told us it might be late. It might take a long time to get this punch list done, just the way it is right now. Welcome to 2022 or 2020, whichever. We have 3 of the same years happening, don't we? Yeah. So this gets messy. This gets really messy and we've got to do our best. And Bill is an extreme example of this. Bill is very good about walking a new construction property every week. If he has one under contract, he goes out there weekly to make sure that things are in order. He's shaking his head. That's not true, but I know better because I've asked him on his way out the door, where are you going? And I'm just going to go walk this new construction. And maybe not weekly, but he's very good about staying on top of that and making sure there's progress. And then he reports in to his people. I walk the property. Here's what's going on. Here's pictures from last week. Here's pictures from this week. There's progress. So the seller, though, look at this, has the right to counter punch list items. We won't do that. The buyer has the right to agree or not, and then not close. And prior to closing, the buyer, of course, has the right to have the punch list items re-inspected that were done and have that inspector back out there. So all of this is very important to set up at the very beginning, the expectations with your buyers. Very important to set up these expectations in the beginning and let them know you need to have a place to live and a plan if this doesn't close on time. And the most prime example I can think of at the moment is what Keith's buyers are going through, where they went under contract when? May 1st. May 1st. That's not 2022, May 1st. And what stage is the construction in right now?
Nothing really happened. They just broke ground in the neighborhood.
They just broke ground in
When
the
was the
neighborhood.
estimated completion or estimated closing?
January 31st. The utilities were
They were supposed to close at the end of last month.
Correct.
And they just now broke ground.
Well, that was the closing. With the days for things happening, construction is February.
So we wrote an extension for February 11th. They couldn't build that in 11 days?
Well,
They should have called Ty.
the original contract had the closing date of the 31st, and then the clause where you give the builder
The additional,
time,
yeah.
it was February 11th.
Right.
And we knew that, I knew back in November that it wasn't gonna be done by
Sure.
January 3rd, because that's 3 months out, and then the best case scenario, 3 months. It wasn't gonna happen. I mean, I don't know how much of it you want me to tell, but it just became a mess
Right.
because we couldn't get answers to why things had no lots of the 67 lots that were in this phase of the development, not one lot was touched other than utilities.
Just put them on the market too soon.
Well, they said they were having problems getting final plat approved, but anyhow, we didn't find that out until after Christmas. And then,
So is it now just a general addendum to move that date out, or how
Well-
did you handle that? Or what?
Now it's a lawsuit.
it is lost.
Now it's a lawsuit. They didn't do what they said they were gonna do. They didn't perform. The buyer still wants the house, but guess what's happened to their rate?
Oh, yeah. I think that they get lucky.
They've had to
Uh-uh.
extend their pre-approval a few times.
Well, so the first thing that happened after we found out a firm date was my client's sister's attorney, so they called. And they hired another attorney to say, well, she drafted up an addendum asking the builder to be willing to pay points down on his loan to where it would be on February 11th. The builder flat out and said they weren't going to do anything.
Yeah.
So once February 11th got, a week before that, then they hired an outside counsel, so there would be a conflict of interest, and they sent another letter stating that he still wants the house, and this is the condition, and that part of the response from the builder was, well, the closing date says not until after the certificate of occupancy is.
Mm.
But the attorney said, no, in the contract, you said you would have the house built by
Completed.
February the 11th. So that's,
So the builder's argument was that because the certificate of occupancy wasn't issued, they're not on the hook,
correct.
even though there wasn't even a house.
Yeah, in order to
Yeah.
have the certificate of occupancy.
Right.
for that house.
Well, the attorney's focused on, and I, quite honestly, in all the contracts, new construction contracts, and most of them I built houses have typically been in some phase of construction. Only a couple have been out of the ground like this.
Yeah.
I've never really focused on that date of construction, understanding that there's probably gonna be a delay. It's always been the closing date. Well, the attorney said no. They said in the contract that the house. And that's
Yeah.
what they went back to the builder on. And that's when I got out. And agent on the builder side got out. And not the attorney side.
Who's the
Builder,
builder?
where it is.
So the buyer wants the house still, but what they're in litigation for right now is that the seller would pay the points on the loan to get their rate back down to where it was so they can close.
February the 11th, when closing was supposed to
On
be.
February 11th, what was my rate? You need to buy the points down so I can have that. Now, here's the seller's contention in their mind, I'm sure. What have prices done since last May? These people are getting a great deal and they should shut up and
Right.
take
their medicine and be grateful that we even let them buy for this amount.
The builder did offer to pay, refund the deposit.
And terminate.
And terminate.
Yeah.
But
We'll
my
give
guy
you your
wants
money
the-
back.
my guy wants the house. Unfortunately for him, has a house he's in right now.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
needs, his family's gonna grow. When he gets married over the summer, he needs to stay, so
Yeah.
that's the issue.
How can you trust the builder though at that point?
Well, the other thing that, and this is something that, I also learned, and Jason told me this attorney was that when the builder came back, after they said, the first one was that the closing date wasn't until after this. The second thing they started poking around was going through the contract to see where my client might breach the contract, and they focused on the Well, he worked with a lender and has documentation where he got approved for the loan, but we never sent a letter. And so I'm like, crap, panicking, but in that, notwithstanding the argument now that that might be construction loan, because what I did is I was thinking that was an approval letter. It doesn't say you have to send the approval letter to the builder, it says
Have to have one.
you have to be approved.
Yeah.
So that's
Right.
where that's the argument now. That's the latest and greatest. So there's all kinds of pitfalls in this contract that maybe lose a little bit of sleep. And now I'm glad you're bringing this up because now that we've gone through this, it really is
Yeah,
not as clear as I used to think it was. And I've probably done a dozen new construction homes using this contract.
Well, last year's contract was clearer than this year's contract.
I agree. So paragraph 27 is the next and final one that we'll talk about. We've got and of course, they've got to get a disclosure. We want them to provide a disclosure. That's a little bit different on this one because we really don't want that disclosure until the property's completed. Until it's done, we don't know if somebody had a short in their extension cord and caused an electrical fire and everything was replaced or not.
They may not be truthful about that.
Right. So we want that disclosure after the property's completed. Now, paragraph 27, very important, closing date. So many people look at this date. If bad things happen during the construction process that delay the construction, the buyer and seller agree to delay the completion of home to blank unless we write up an extension. That's what they,
Paragraph 13.
no, 12. That's what they write the closing date to be. So in Keith's case, completion date no later than February 11th, closing February 11th. No. What has to happen after completion? Inspection and we got to get the property disclosure. We don't want that until after completion. What happens after the inspection? Repairs. Do we want to verify that those repairs are made before we close? Give yourself time. Builders aren't going to like that. What do we have to do if the property isn't completed on February 11th? An addendum. The property wasn't completed. This date moves, this date moves, this date moves. Completion date moves. When are you going to have it done by? I need to write that in. Well, give us another 2 weeks. Okay. Here's a 14-day extension along with 14 more days for inspection, along with 7 more days for you to complete repairs. New closing date is. It makes sense, doesn't it? Does that protect your buyer? What if your buyer gets frustrated and says, I can't do that. I have to move in. Okay. Here are the things that you're missing. Now that you know, do you still want to move in? Yes. Okay. We have good informed buyers.
So the example I'll give you, the one I'm working now, I think the estimated completion date was April 14th. I put, and then there's a paragraph right below that or something that talks about, I put a 30-day window there, but then I think I put closing date as like April 27th, 2 weeks after
Mhm.
estimated. So you're saying
Right.
be prepared to have to move that problem.
And I would do a 21-day after completion close because of inspection and repairs. Yeah.
That's
And I would say on or before in that addendum.
That's assuming that, I guess completion would assume you have to certificate.
Right.
Because they responded, in the initial contract, they counted X number of days after the COD.
A certificate of occupancy. Yeah.
Which, I learned a little bit of this after.
Yeah.
That closing date is floating around
Bloody.
somewhere. so it's probably, we've got to assume they have the COE, so put a date after, and then come back and redo the extension of those maps. They could just be floating there for.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that's what the building thoughts, like, what we deal with, we're not closing until 14 days after COE, COO, and it's like.
Yeah, you can't be vague on your dates. You can't be vague on your dates. Put them down. And that way you've got it documented correctly. This will be edited some and then put in the drive as instructions for a new construction offer. And after I get clarity on paragraph 7,
I was gonna say, do you think there could be changes made between?
God, I hope so. You know, it won't be until 2023, but I hope so. And I hope that Tim Grooms gives me a good explanation on this paragraph so I can move forward.
I think those 2021 contract, that paragraph said the same thing.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. So, good clarity for you guys. You learn anything today? Yeah,
It's helpful and things to look out for.
yeah. I would not, me personally, like I wrote today's class, having this as a resource right now, I would not write a new construction contract without resourcing this. Because of the time that I spent studying it and knowing how easily I forget. So small edits going into this, a visit with some more brokers and Tim Grooms, and hopefully I'll have strong clarity to plug in about some of this. And you'll have good direction on how to guide your buyers and how to write a locked down offer and how to do those addendums that you'll need when it doesn't close on time. Okay. Not going to ask what your favorite part of the meeting was because contracts aren't fun. I like it because I pick it apart and it's kind of interesting, but not fun. Just let you guys know again, Felicia is out of the office today, feeling sick, so please say a prayer for her. And Tana is at the Fayetteville office. I was not told you'd be here. I'm happy you're here, but I told Kelly that you'd be in Bentonville, so she's up there. Kelly, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Could you just leave that check on her desk, and I will have her drop one off and put it in the same spot, and we'll just swap them.
Okay, it's on her desk.
Awesome, awesome. Any questions? No? All right. You guys have a great week. Thanks for joining today.
Closing dates mean nothing on the new construction.
It sounds like that's what I got.
I'm all over it. The village is